I would say validate. The Hebrew word ashrei, which is the word for the highest level of happiness, is etymologically tied to the Hebrew word yeshura, which is the word for validating, for licensing their feelings as valid and as understandable. And there's something very comforting, especially at this age, to feel that you have your parents have your back, and that they're there for you, and to say, hey, look, what you're feeling is the most natural thing in the world.
Welcome back to the Jews Next Door podcast, where each month we explore a different topic of our parenting hierarchy with the goal of raising the next generation of passionate and committed Jews. I'm your host, Rabbi Yair Menchel, and in this series, we are helping parents to prepare their children for going back to school. And this is part 2. We already discussed the 1st through 8th graders, and now tonight we're going to be talking about the teens. Teens back to school fears. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. In the last episode, we already spoke about all the 1st through 8th graders. And now we're going to be talking with Dr. David Pelcovitz, whose reputation really precedes him. We don't really need to go through his whole bio, but Dr. Pelcovitz is the chair in psychology and Jewish education at Azrieli's Graduate School of Jewish Education and Administration at Yeshiva University. And Dr. Pelcovitz is the go-to for so many, really helping children and adolescents in so many ways. And he wrote a book with his own father, Balanced Parenting. And thank you so much, Dr. Pelcovitz, for taking the time.
Thank you. Pleasure to be talking to you again.
So yeah, this is our second talk. It's really a pleasure. So there, when we're talking about teens, so, we already had this episode on 1st through 8th graders, and it was very, very different things. I feel like with teens, there's 2 very specific categories that it comes down to. It really comes down to academic fears. Like, are they going to like their teachers? Are they going to be able to keep up with the workload? Because the workload in high school is especially intense, and even middle school as they get there, but high school especially. And there's the social fears of is their friend group going to be the same? Maybe things happened over the summer. Are they going to be invited to group hangouts? Are they is their first day outfit even going to look good? Will they make it to their sports team? There's so many different things that are going on in a teenager's life, and they are so intense, each on their own right. So I would love to go through maybe each of these. How does a parent help a teen to be ready to go back to school, to be able to handle all of this? Because this is everything I just mentioned can be going on for just one teen, and imagine dealing with all of that. So what do they do, Doctor?
Yeah, it's a lot. One size doesn't fit all. It's going to very much depend on the temperament and personality of your teen. But the key is to be present, to give them time to be able to really talk to you about what's on their mind. That's as long as you can't mess it up if you're present. What gets teens into trouble is when their parents are so completely preoccupied that they're just not there, or they're not modeling communication, or their anxiety gets in the way. Then it's something that's going to need to be corrected. But for the most part, I find that this has been going on for as long as I could remember. My memory goes back in terms of my time with practicing as a clinical psychologist, specializing in this age group. It was just as intense going back 40 years. So
really, you're saying it's always been this way, even with all the advancements of social media and everything like that.
I think so. And look, that's not, we'll get into it, I'm sure, later on. Social media is very much a game changer, and it has intensified things. But I think that, I remember going back to the very beginning of my practice, I was extremely busy, so
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem, I feel like you're always very busy between either your practice and also just, so many speaking gigs, I'm sure.
Yeah.
A lot of the teenage preschool anxiety comes with you know, needing to look one way in one setting and let's say another way in a different setting. So let's say at home they act one way, but when they're with their friends in school, they act one way. And even when in their school with one group of friends, they act one way, and then they have to act a different way when with a different group of friends or with their sports friends. Or so how does a teen deal with that? And I guess how can a parent best guide their teen to be able to deal with that?
Yeah. So first of all, this is an age that kids are really convinced that everybody's looking at them. Or
Mm,
it's an age of tremendous self consciousness.
yeah.
And the reality is that, there's a reason why there's a whole genre of coming of age movies here
Mm,
where,
yeah.
where,
It's true.
it's because it's a time of great intensity, um, great dysregulation, you know, from a neurobiologic standpoint, we're at a place that, it's hard to have, the same level of stress management and being able to you just calm ourselves down. And it's the most normal thing in the world. It's what kids this age do for a living. And, parents play a central role in just normalizing it.
How do they do that? What I mean, what can they do to normalize it, especially when a teen, in a way, doesn't always take the words of their parents so seriously.
Right. You know
So
what? That's true. That's absolutely true. That, what kids are all about at this age is, some rebelliousness, some pushing back. But you
yeah.
know what? Even with that going on, if you woke up the average yeshiva kid at 3 in the morning and you ask them, whose opinion do you value the most? You know, or if the kid got in some kind of serious trouble, it's always the parents they value the most.
Mm.
So there's such an even though it may not feel that way, such an incredibly important role the parents have. So I don't want to minimize it, but I think that parents often underestimate um, the role that they have in their child's life.
Right. So what describe that role a little bit more to us. Meaning, like, what is that ideal role? What are they? I mean, I know you said to the first question I was saying, you said that they should just be there for them and to listen to them. What once they get past that first step and the child, let's say, feels heard, what's the next step of the parents? You
Is
know,
to just in a way without um, having your child drown in your chicken soup, to just stay there and check in with them, in as casual and natural a way as possible by shutting your cell phone off, okay, and asking your kid, how are you doing? Really listening, really trying to, model for them, what real communication is all about. And if they're not open about wanting to talk to you about what's happening, that's totally fine also. You have to
right.
respect their right to remain silent. Yeah.
And what's the balance between like pushing a child to say, you know what, you're going to be fine, versus just trying to validate them? What point should a parent say, no, 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 you're being, you're blowing this out of proportion. It's not so crazy. Versus, I get it, and I really get it, and I'm gonna not try to push you to be okay with this right now.
So you need both. You know, what is it that Chazal tell us is that in raising children, the key is to find the balance between small Docheh and makarevet. The
Mm,
left hand pushing away while the right hand, interestingly, the stronger hand brings close.
that is
Um,
interesting.
yeah. So that's something that is very much, very, very much the balance that we need to find with them. And in general, my understanding of the research on adolescent parenting, it's all about that balance. It's all about being there. It's all about, if at all possible, shutting that phone off for at least a period of time a day where you're really speaking to them.
Hmm.
As long as you're doing that and they know that you really care about them and you model talking about what's going on in your own life. You know,
Right.
totally fine and important actually to do that.
Is there like a line of where you should be sharing with your own life versus where you shouldn't when you're doing that?
Yeah, you have to always remember that's a good point. That's you need to keep in mind that you're not necessarily going to be um, able to have such a blurring of the boundaries that
Hmm.
you're oversharing.
Sure.
No, yeah, that could be problematic also. But again, the last thing I want people to take from this discussion is the belief that it's easy to cause damage. It's just not that easy. Parents have been doing this going back forever. Back to the Gemara, for example, and there's so many examples in the Gemara of exactly, you know, challenges with, for example, kids drinking
Mm.
or kids being rebellious in different ways, and there not being any simple solutions. You know, there's you know the fact that with you look at David Hamelech and the statement of well, it's Savo Lo'olo, that as a father, he never made his child sad. He never said no. Now, obviously, he grew with time, but nothing new about these challenges.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fascinating.
yeah,
Something you mentioned before is so interesting. I noticed this a lot when I was teaching in high school that adolescents have this perception that a lot more people are looking at them then. Is there a role for parents to play in terms of helping them to kind of get out of their heads in a way in that sense?
yeah. I think that could be helpful. Then there's the concept of the universal audience, and you think that everybody is looking at you and listening to you, and that you're somehow living a drama that's unique only to you, And the
Mhm.
reality is that, there's a very important role for parents to say, just based on our greater experience, of reassuring them, letting them know, that this is totally normal to feel upset. This is part of what's happening on this stage of your life. And you may feel you're the only one, but you're not. This is, you'd be shocked at how many friends have the same kinds of challenges. And to just, you know, I think they'll accept the normalization more than many parent thinks, you
Mhm.
know. Um,
How does a parent get through to them to get them to believe them without their child thinking you're just out of reality? Like you think that's going on, but it's not really going on. And like, yeah, maybe in your day that's what was going on, but it's not really going on now. Like, how do we get the?
yeah,
I feel like I could see like a teen saying that so easily.
yeah. And the team will say it and will believe it. And that's fine. And then your job is to just not to challenge necessarily, but to just validate, you know, in finding the balance between love and limit setting, always err on the side of thing of love and normalization and never minimizing what they're feeling.
Right.
There's no greater way, and to get away from some of the things that we know parents have been doing forever, which is to demand, which is to lecture. And there's nothing that leads to parent deafness more than that, you know.
That's
So
true.
that's the key, you know.
That's very true. So, something that I feel like is a big difference between, what we spoke about in the first through eighth grade episode, where like class placements, for example, are class placements, I feel for first and through eighth grade, the parent freaks out versus in high school, the teen is the one who's freaking out. Like, oh, I didn't get that teacher that I wanted, or maybe they're less really focused on their teacher. Maybe as a teacher, I'm thinking that, but maybe they're thinking I'm not with that friend group who I'm always with. So how to, especially like, let's say they just get them the night before, right? They get them the night before the first day of school, and this teen is freaking out. What do
Yeah,
the parents
yeah.
do?
Again, I would say validate. Right? The Hebrew word ashrei, which is the word for the highest level of happiness, is etymologically tied to the Hebrew word ishur, which is the word for validating, for licensing their their feelings as valid and as understandable.
Mm,
And there's something very comforting, you know, especially at this age, to feel that you have your parents, that your parents have your back,
yeah.
and that they're there for you, and to say, "Hey, look, what you're feeling is the most natural thing in the world."
Yeah. Wow. I hear that. I love that idea about the ashray and the yeshua. It's beautiful. That's beautiful. If sometimes what happens is that this, over the summer, let's say ending off the school year, you have one friend, this group of friends who are best of friends. They're super, super close. And then something happens over the summer. And now, let's say one is on the outs, they're not even talking anymore. Or let's say two friends and now they're the best of friends, they're inseparable, and now they don't even talk to each other. So coming back to school under those circumstances can feel very scary, especially for a teen, as that the social interactions are so important and you don't have that go-to person anymore. So what can we do for our
Yeah.
teens
So
navigating that?
again, the first thing I would say is that's the nature of adolescent development. Is
Hmm.
it's very rare that people have the same set of friends that they have in their middle school days, or more so in their ninth grade class. It's almost unheard of for them to have the exact same set of friends at the end of their senior year. It's
Hmm.
just, which is good. It's part of the way adolescents define themselves, where they define their personality, where
Sure.
they define their identity. I once wrote a paper in some psychiatry textbook just about this, about friendships. And there's actually an algorithm almost about, at the end of ninth grade, this is what's going to happen to friendships. And at the beginning, it's going to be like this. In 10th,
Huh.
it's like this. And 11th,
It's so
this one.
interesting. Wow.
And if you didn't have that, it just means that you're not doing part of what high school's all about, which is, or middle school's all about, which is exactly this. It's exactly to try on different friends for size,
Mm.
to define your identity that way. And that's the way you discover who you are and the way you get more confidence.
That's so validating for a teen to hear that. That's so valid. Like this is really normal. Like there's actually an algorithm for how normal that is.
Right,
It's
right. Yeah, yeah.
especially for teens who are so into into social media, the algorithm, like, oh, the algorithm of social media, they can understand that now. Before they'd be like, what's an algorithm? But now, okay,
Right.
on social media helps them understand that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a positive of
Yeah,
social
yeah.
media.
There are definitely positives, right? Talk about that.
What about if, all of these fears that we're talking about? So the night before school, it hits the teen really hard, and they're having a total meltdown to the point where they actually they're telling their parent, I'm not going to school tomorrow. There's no chance. I'm not coming. You can't get me to go into the building. How much do we push in that type of situation? Because, like, we want to validate them and we want to hear them. At the same time, got to get them into the building, right? Like, sometimes the best thing is just to get them into the building. So is that still true for teens? Like, I know for younger children, you got to get them into the building. Is that the same thing for
I
teens?
think it's maybe even more so. Maybe even
Interesting.
more so. Because
Why so?
teens have, well, because, you know, you're, you know, in when kids are younger, it's not necessarily going to be the end of the world if they miss a little bit. But
Hmm.
in high school, you're playing for keeps to a certain extent. And I don't want
What do
to
you mean
know
by
it.
that?
Well, in other words, that if you start to fall behind, it could really have impact
Mm,
on your ability to be able to, you know, make it into the next stage. And depending on um, what your goals are and what your aspirations are.
sure.
But part of life is to be able to develop kind of maturity that comes with needing to show up, There's a Woody Allen said, 90% of life is showing. Now, so they have to know you have to show up, and it's going to be challenging at times. And they may have been used to parents who might have been helicopter parents or, let's say, the Panaderas, paved the ways.
Right.
That
The bulldozer parents.
exactly, or the snowplow parents.
Right. Snowplow.
And all those things are very real. But the reality is now you're at a stage where the key to success is going to be able to be there and to to basically do what you need to do. And life isn't always so simple, and that's one of the most important lessons of high school.
It's interesting. So one of the things you mentioned before is that the key role during this time is really for parents to just be there, just to be there. But it's interesting because it comes at a time when teens are kind of doing the opposite. They're like peeling away from their parents. So in a way, it could be hard sometimes for the parent to be there and to really know what's going on with the teen, what's bothering them, what's on their mind, or even what their interests are to help them. So, like, how does a parent navigate that challenging part?
Well, number one, I would say, is cut yourself some slack. You know, what you're struggling with is what parents have been struggling with probably over the millennia, but certainly over the last number of decades. And life is much more complicated because of social media, because of the reality the kids often are hanging out with a peer where the parents rarely say no,
Mm.
rarely, have that kind of limit setting, and they complain to each other, the kids, and every kid thinks that they're the only ones who have parents who are so embarrassing, you know.
Yeah,
Wow.
that is the most classic thing.
Well, yeah, they will duck, when they're going with their parents to the movies or to whatever, or to a restaurant, they'll often try to pretend that they're invisible. They can embarrass so much more easily than they can in the past, and that's okay. That's people aren't alone with that. You know, yeah.
Yeah. Are there things that the parent should like try to do to like minimize the embarrassment, or like no, like that's just it's gonna happen whether you try to minimize it or not?
I would guess that. Again, the answer isn't to always try to save them from feeling any kind of negative emotions. You want
Sure.
to do it calmly. The key is in your interactions with your child in situations like that is to couple of basic recommendations. Number one is to avoid avoidance. Make sure that you gently push them to confront what they're nervous about. Number two is a level of calmness. You don't want to yell, you don't want to scream, you don't want to criticize. The most effective parenting is parenting that's marked by a very minimal amount of emotionalism. Otherwise, as I said before, it's going to have the opposite kind of effect. And it's
Right.
certainly not going to get us our goal, which is to cement the connection. And the very important thing for parents to do is to not judge themselves. Parents are often so tough on themselves. Kids
Mm.
are not that fragile. They're really not, you know. So,
Yeah, it's interesting because everything we've been talking about so far has really been about the helping the teen. But parents, what advice do you give for parents to help themselves in these situations, like when they're dealing with all this?
and it's just to not beat themselves up. There's, you know, excellent reasons to believe that you have to work really, really hard to make a mistake that's irrevocable.
Mm.
It just doesn't work that way,
Yeah.
you know. But the one thing that you have to always keep, you know, in the center of your mind is that you be there, you know, that you be there. There's you know, so much research that shows that uh, real focused time where you're listening and you're hearing and you're present and you're not having a reaction that leads to alienation. Of course, you're going to mess it up, you know, but that's okay, you know. So
Yeah, yeah, totally. You mentioned before that this got definitely got magnified by social media. What would you say are the, I guess, the reasons that it has been magnified by social media? And is there anything that a parent can even do to help reduce the anxiety from social media, or it's just it's built in a way?
no, there's some very very critical roles that parents can take. It's interesting. There was just an American Psychological Association put out recommendations basically for society on how to handle social media. And they have a very interesting kind of an approach because it's like everything else we're talking about is to find the balance.
Right.
So they talk about that kids using social media should be encouraged to use it, to view it as that it can be a positive force that creates all kinds of opportunities for increased social connection, for increased friendships, and increased emotional intimacy that can promote healthy kinds of connection.
That's
That's
so
like,
interesting.
yeah,
I wouldn't think of that as social media.
yeah, but and right, me neither. But when I read this is put out by this, APA health advisor on social media use in adolescents. And the more I read it, it's uh, based on really very intensive research by the most respected researchers in this area. I recognize the names there. These are people you could rely on. Um,
Hmm.
and
What do you think is like the reasoning behind it? Because I would think of anything like from what I saw in like school all the time, students would be standing right next to each other or sitting in the same classroom or sitting right near each other in the lunchroom, and they'll just go on social media to not interact with the people who are right next to them.
absolutely, and that's absolutely true, and absolutely very important for parents to realize. It becomes, associated with increased anxiety and all those things. Like everything else in an area like this, the truth lies in the balance. So yeah, it's if you look at some of the research done by reading people and social media, um, they, you know, even if you look at it in terms of what the studies show, let me just share with you one study
Sure.
where basically they talk about the reality that from the time social media became so incredibly prominent in the interior psychological life of adolescents, there's been a massive increase in depression and anxiety,
Mhm.
and then all kinds of all kinds of markers of stuff that's just not good for kids. And to the
Right.
point that you start to wonder, why not just throw it away?
Yeah.
Which is probably not the answer because you can't throw it away. It's here to stay. It's part of life. It's very interesting that the people who set up the program in Shea State and City Field, you remember that a few years back. So there were
Sure.
a bunch of superstar rabbis in the Haredi world who
Yeah. Yeah.
said, like, wow, we really have to do something about this. And let's get rid of it. Let's burn the internet. There were some cartoons that they put out then showing beer net, like just like you burn Hummings, you have to burn your computers. And then they realized that it only made it worse. You know, if anything, it totally backfired. So the people behind it, who were really very impressive people, because they had the security to be able to say, no, something, we blew it last time. We
Hmm.
blew it. And what they did is they had a another asifa, okay, Um, in this is in, the first one is in Cleveland, and they, much to my astonishment, they said we just blew it, we just blew it, and they set it up so that they made very small, minor changes in order to have a healthy, enduring set of change in the way we connect to to social media and to the internet. So they did things like the first thing they did was they told everybody, "Here's the first thing we want you to do: keep your phone. You know, keep your phone. We're just asking you to do one thing different for starters. Anytime you're talking to somebody, climb upon him, heart to heart, face to face, take your phone. Don't shut it off. That's okay. Just put it on mute and put it in your pocket. That's all you have to do. Okay. So what was amazing was not only was there almost universal um, uh, kind of excitement on the part of both kids and parents about that, because it was very doable. And they had people do it.
And it's not like saying, "No, no, no, we don't do this at all." It's not like shutting it down. It's like, "No, we're
No,
gonna do it, but we're gonna learn the right way to do it."
it's exactly. It's the balance between isolation and inoculation. Went the
Mm,
way Rav Hirsch talked about it, or Social Hirsch, which is we're going to go for inoculating. We're going to go for you keep it. It's a powerful force. Let's take it and channel. And the most amazing thing that happened after that first SIFA, I'm sorry, the second time around, is kids loved it.
mm.
Parents
Wow.
were okay,
Yeah.
but kids really loved it so much that they wanted more. They kept
Yeah.
pushing their parents to have more programs like that.
Wow.
This was
That is
pretty
fascinating.
amazing.
They felt heard. They felt really
They
heard.
felt heard, and they, all the research shows that when it comes to social media, that you know, kids recognize that it's making them feel not so terrific about themselves and not so terrific about their world, and it's raising their, you know, their anxiety level, their social anxiety, all the things that we all know about. So once
Yeah.
they make this kind of change, um, they started really insisting that they have more programs, I think for at least 3 years in a row.
Hmm.
They
Wow.
insisted on refresher programs. It led to, I don't know if it led to permanent change, but it led to sustaining change.
Wow. Very, very cool. Wow. I'm curious if you have if a parent comes into your private practice and they're bringing their teen and their teen is specifically, let's say perseverating on this some sort of anxiety related to school. What would be your first step?
My first step would be to have them give their kids a place to really talk about that anxiety.
I mean, you're saying it would be a joint. It would be joint parents with the
Oh, I'm
adolescent.
sorry. You'll be joined. It would definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah. It has to be partnership. Things do much better when there's that kind of partnership. And again, parents are often surprised at how much kids really want that.
Interesting. It sounds like, based on what you're saying, that sometimes you don't not obviously we need the therapy, but sometimes we just need to be able to hear our children to in a way avoid the therapy. Like maybe we could if we could hear our children, sometimes that would be all they need.
You could save a lot of money not having to come to places like this.
Totally hear you. Would you say that there's any points that within this topic of teens, adolescents, and back to school fears that we haven't yet discussed?
I think just the idea that that kids, first of all, the kids really do, in spite of their suggesting otherwise, you really do need to be part of that partnership with our parents. Um, I think we pretty much touched on, most of the things that I
Sounds good.
hope to cover. Can I ask you a question?
Please.
What are you're in the front lines? What are you finding now, especially given that you're now, you know, working in a broader way where your exposure has
Yeah.
shifted a little bit?
I found that the biggest thing is the social dynamic of, like you mentioned before, the normalcy, but it's constant, the friends changing. That's the first thing I find, and the drama, the amount of drama that they're experiencing, and therefore, as a result, the anxiety that teens are dealing with because of that drama. They don't like sometimes they don't even wanna walk down the hallway or want you don't even wanna walk into the classroom because they know that there's this drama. That's, like, number 1 I find, and the other thing I found the most is that they kind of act fake or act differently than their true selves. And when I've had opportunities to speak to students, when they kind of let their hair down and they act themselves, it's such a different version than what I see them acting in the hallway or in my classroom, and it's fascinating. It's sad. It's sad, and I wonder in a way if it has what to do with social media, the fact that they have to always present themselves as
Sure,
being
sure.
picture perfect, and it's sad. I mean, I can't imagine myself having gone through like, I didn't live at a time when all of that existed. Not I didn't live, I live it, but I didn't grow up in that way, and therefore, I can't imagine having to deal with having to always be something so different.
Listen, we
It's
remember the very word personality comes from the word PERSONA, which is a mask. So even before social media, you know, there was this mask, but the mask now is
yeah,
it's so much more challenging than it used to be.
yeah,
I'm so happy that I didn't have to grow up, that time. But again, it's always the balance and the ingredients of resilience are also there, which
yeah,
was, there's a lot of modeling out there for, for, the core of resilience, which is, um, connection and having a community that cares, having teachers who get you, which is becomes so much more of a positive force than it had been 20, 30, 40 years ago. And there's a lot of good stuff going on.
yeah. Wow, for sure, it's true. As we wrap up, any final message to parents as they go through getting ready for the new school year, all these fun times with their with their adolescents.
And the main message is believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. There's this great thought uh, from um, Northland that says, "Yesh ben chorim sherucho ruach shaleved." There are free people who have the spirit of a slave. Yesh eved sherucho b'le'aseros. And they are slaves of a
Mm,
spirit filled with freedom. And it
yeah,
says this key point: Haneman las miuso ben chorenu. Okay, anybody who believes in you know their true inner authentic self is always going to be free. Umisha kol chaya rak b'mashato v'yafa be'enei acheret. Somebody whose entire life is worrying about what other people think. You know, what does this person want? What does this person think? Always worried about what impression am I making on other whoever. That person will always be a slave.
wow,
Social media can bring us to that point in a very negative way, but also in a very positive way. And that is something that parents and kids um, can use as the guiding force for being able to go into the new year fully equipped and a belief in themselves.
amazing, love it. Thank you so much. The ideas
Thank
of
you.
the balance and being there for their children, despite the fact that the child might be pushing away, is these are very valuable ideas. And thank you so much for your time. I
My
really
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Jews Next Door. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. I'd love to hear your takeaways. Reach out to us. Reach out to me at yair@genof.org, hi@genof.org. You can check us out on the website. You could leave a question there. We'd love to be in touch. Please be in touch. Check us out on Instagram at Parenting the Jews Next Door. Hit me up on Twitter at Yair Menchel. And we're on TikTok now too. We have some great content, a lot of really great insights into parenting, tips, parenting pointers, reaction videos, and quotes. We have a lot going on. We have a lot of articles. You want to check it out. Check it out at genof.org. You won't be sorry you did. And I look forward to hearing from you. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, make sure you subscribe and share it with your family and friends. Looking forward to another great episode next week.